Now we come to one of the not so good stories, and I'm going to cry on your shoulders here a little bit. Because as I mentioned before, in the first round robin, metal-faced sandwich panels was deemed an exotic product. And one of the major reasons for this was that the test results we saw in the SBI test did not at all correlate with what we saw in the room corner test. So I have since looked further into this, and a study has been made in SP in Sweden and also a BRE in the UK. And what I also see in literature on websites, manufacturers' websites, and that is that the SBI test puts most sandwich panels in the Euroclass B. And now I haven't gone through the whole Euroclass system, but I can tell you that Euroclass B is the highest classification which a combustible product can make it into. And when you are Class B, the reference back to the room corner test means that that product should not cause flashover in the room corner. Meaning if it's used in a small room, it should not cause flashover. Unfortunately, when you test these products in the room corner test, or in the freestanding version of the room corner test, which was specifically developed for sandwich panels, most of these panels often go to flashover. I think the picture speaks for itself. That panel there was tested in the SBI test and obtained a nice Class B S2D0, and thereby can, in many countries, be used probably even in escape routes. Because Class B is a very, very important class in many countries, because they allow a little bit of combustible products to be used without any fire barrier as long as it's Class B and do not cause flashover. When you go lower in Class B, they normally require some kind of thermal barrier to be used in front of the product. But this product is Class B, according to the Euroclass system. So my conclusion on this, and also a few other people, among them people from SP and others, the SBI test cannot predict the fire hazard of metal-faced sandwich panels. Unfortunately, we are in a situation that the CE marking of products that is governed by product standards, and the product standard for metal-faced sandwich panels has already been published by SEM, and we're just waiting for it to come in the official journal of the European Commission there, and thereby being ready for CE mark. And on this CE mark will be a reaction to fire classification based on the SBI test. And I have fought this as hard as I could, but apparently didn't win the battle. To me, this is a very sad example of unsafe classification on the CE mark. And this is what happens when you forget the basic principles behind the test. And you simply just say, oh, we have a test and we use it. And we don't question the use of the test. It's good, we have it, we use it. It is my hope that this will be the only example of such a bad practice. But I have to admit, I do fear that this is just the first of many, as the basic principles behind the Euroclass system has been forgotten by most of the decision makers. And this is my reasons for have spent so much time on it today. My final little thing I want to get into before my conclusions is innovative products. Because I have a feeling a lot of those will also fall in the so-called 10%. For those, I believe it's very important to question if the SBI test is the appropriate test. As I mentioned before, we have the guidance paper G from the Commission, which makes it possible to define other reference scenarios and test methods if needed. Like for instance, fire in a room is not an appropriate scenario for all products. If you make a product that's going to go on a facade, who wants the reference scenarios as fire in a room? You have to define a different reference scenario. Actually, I find that for the specification writers that are writing product standards, which are then referring to the fire standards, they have an obligation to question the Euroclass system for their product group. They know their product group. They know what they can and cannot do. I believe they have an obligation to question the system. And of course, they might not all be fire experts, but they can go to TC127 and SEN, which are the fire experts, and ask them for assistance. After all this talk, I'll reach my conclusions. And the first one, some of you are going to laugh at that one. But I do believe that the Euroclass system and the SPI test is a big step forward as in European harmonization. At least now we have one test, one so-so test, instead of 20 so-so or even bad tests. Also, I do believe in the conclusions by Bjørn Sundström that the SPI test is capable of classifying 90% of construction products. And I would like to say 90% here is not market share, it's types, product types. But I think the most important conclusion for me to draw today is that remembering the link between the SPI test and the room corner test is critical if we want a fire-safe Europe. Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead.
Does the fire regulators group still exist? And if it does, what are their reactions to the sandwich panel situation?
No, the fire regulators group do no longer exist. The Commission didn't like having a fire regulators group. They changed it to the expert group on fires, so they were only allowed to give their opinions to the Commission, and the Commission can choose if they want to listen to it or not. The expert group has lightly discussed the sandwich panel issue, and some of them definitely sees there is a problem. Others, they've forgotten the history here and said, well, the SPI test is the test we should use. That's all I'm saying. Some of them.
When we think how we're going to have to increase the insulation of buildings very considerably over the next 10 to 20 years, it's very worrying.
I agree.
Question right here.
Yeah, as far as I remember, we were one of the laboratories involved on this initial testing, SPI testing and so on. I was not there, I was not working in the company, so I cannot say anything about the results. But I remember that the regulator group were thinking about two different ways of testing. The SPI one and then a Roland, because the test method was based on a French standard. I don't know if you were involved in this and if you can get some idea if the Roland could get a better relationship with the room corner test, for example. Because as far as I remember, for the comments that I get from these first initial period persons that were involved on, Roland were one of the best choices, but it was not elected because of political reasons.
That you have to ask the fire regulators, not me. But it's true. All the products that were tested in the SPI from Robin was also tested in the Roland by a few laboratories. I don't remember if it was more convincing than the SPI test. I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm quite convinced that Roland wouldn't solve the problem, for instance, with sandwich panels.
We go to the back first, Leonard.
Why was